There is a social inequality in access to nature. For each 360 metres further away you were from green or blue space, the higher your incidence of common mental diseases. So if there's ever a policy that says we need to create more green space in cities, that is the evidence base you need.
Walking to the park and sitting on a bench and eating a sandwich rather than sitting at your desk, if you can find that 20 minutes.
A million times better. That will benefit your health.
You're doing all right.
I'm absolutely
I'm absolutely breathing. Kathy, we decided to interview you in the woods. Sceptical's too strong a word, but this is certainly playing into my hands because the notable thing is we're all extremely cold. Is this good for us?
It is cold, it has to be said. But no, it's very, very good for us. I mean, you can hear the trees just blowing in the wind. If you smell, you can smell the scents of this forest. You can see all these green shapes around you.
Xand did. Hold on a second. I'm not persuaded yet.
Each sense triggers different mechanisms in our bodies that brings about positive health benefits.
Is there a central mechanism for it?
Well, I'd say there's 4 mechanisms. So first of all, it's the autonomic nervous system. Basically, when we see green or we hear the wind in the leaves or we hear tuneful bird song, it automatically triggers changes in the body that lower our blood pressure, that change our heart rate variability. So the variability is enhanced when we're calmer. Our heartbeats go lower. So all these physiological changes happen in our bodies automatically.
And hold on, these are actually changes that some of them we give people medication to induce.
Absolutely. And that's the really interesting thing is the levels of changes that are seen. Some of them are the same as the sorts you'd want to bring about by giving someone a medicine to do that. But that's only one pathway. The second pathway, which is, you see, it affects the endocrine system, the hormonal system. So you get changes in cortisol, for example. You get changes in adrenaline, a lowering of adrenaline. But there's also a lot of the psychological metrics done through measurement of brainwave activity. Those change significantly when you have seen, touched, heard different aspects of nature. So again, a very significant change is apparent. The point each and every time is it's not you think I'm in nature, I must be calmer. This is being done in clinical settings and they're seeing these very, very big changes occurring when people are interacting with particular aspects of nature.
And this is important, is these are clinically significant
Yes.
changes.
I think one of the most interesting, and this is the 4th thing that triggers you, is we're sitting in this lovely forest. You can definitely smell it's a forest, can't you? And actually what you're smelling are the volatile organic compounds, so the compounds that are being given out by the plants but also by the soil. And when we breathe those plant scents in, what they've shown is that actually some of those molecules pass into your blood. And once they're in your blood, certain ones of them interact in the same way and on the same biochemical pathways as if you're taking a prescription drug.
So there's almost sort of airborne drugs.
Absolutely. In this forest, you'll be getting this incredible volatile compounds, and there's been some really interesting experiments done on this. So pine, that very piney smell. So you take that scent and you basically put someone in a clinical setting and you puff it out, they're psychologically much, much calmer within about 20 seconds. That lasts for up to 10 minutes, and these are ambient levels, these are levels that you smell in the air.
Wow.
Do you think... Okay, I want to make sure we've got all the way through this list, and then I want to let me just put a pin in a question while the plane. We've done a few. Have we finished the mechanisms?
Well, that's another mechanism. You've got these compounds from nature that are in your blood, and they are flowing around your blood and reacting in the same way, in some cases taking a prescription drug. But there is a final one, which is that when we're in this sort of environment, and this is something that was probably the most surprising thing for me, in this environment, in this natural environment, biodiversity itself is full of good bacteria. All the good sort of bacteria that we're often drinking in probiotics or trying to get into our guts. And what they've shown is that your body adopts, or your gut and your skin adopts the signature of the nature you're in, and it adopts the microbiome of the nature. They've done a lovely study in nursery school children in Finland where they compared those that played in sandpits, which they bought soil from the local coniferous forest, and they looked at their skin and gut bacteria after 28 days and found that those children that played in the soil had a hugely enhanced good bacteria in their gut and on their skin. And they also looked at their bloods and found that their T cells were greatly elevated.
I feel like my protestations are kind of dead in the water. I think I'm not even out of the starting blocks with this, am I?
But hang on. I think Chris and I started our walk into the woods with me kind of being the king of autumn, you know,
Yes.
the crunch of acorns
Yeah,
underfoot.
yeah.
Something that was a little bit more almost mystical. The question is it more than the sum of its parts?
Being in a wood, you've got the stacked benefits of all those different things. You've got sound, you've got sight, you've got smell, you've got touch. So I would say that this sort of environment we're sitting in, it maximises all of those benefits. But I think the really important thing to come back to in that is not everyone can go and lie in a wood, walk in a wood, or even get outside the front door.
I feel a bit embarrassed asking my sort of slightly mystical, magical question, but I think maybe that is a bit of what I'm getting at, that when you talk about people who are getting stressed, for instance, looking out the window and onto a green landscape, is it simply the green frequency of light, and you'd shone a green light in their eyes and it would have been the same thing?
Yeah.
Or is it something more about looking out a window and seeing a space that is different? If they'd looked out, rather than onto a green landscape, if they'd looked out onto a blue heather hillside, or they'd looked out onto the Grand Canyon, a sort of terracotta landscape, or a savanna that was more yellow, do you think they would have also felt benefits?
I don't know. I doubt it. A lot of work that's done is looking at what's about the shape of the landscape. So what they've shown is that actually when you scan a landscape, what happens is your eye scans the overall landscape and then it picks out the fractal dimension of the landscape. A fractal is the number of times that something can divide into a shape, divides into itself. So a coastline will have, a big bay and then a smaller bay and a smaller bay. And trees are absolutely naturally fractal. You think about a big branch and then it divides into a smaller branch and a smaller branch and down to a twig.
Oh, that's good. So we're looking up now, and I can immediately see what you're talking about.
And what they've shown is that when they've measured brainwave activity and they've shown people computer-generated fractal images, the most relaxed they are is a mid-fractal dimension. So it's about 1.4. When you take a landscape, if you think of coniferous forest, it's quite recurring. It's got a fractal dimension of about 1.8. When you've got something like a cityscape, it's about 1.2. And when you look at a landscape like the one over there, which is a trees scattered on a more open landscape, that's about 1.4. What we most enjoy and what gives us the greatest sort of physiological relaxation when we're looking at it is this more open landscape with a few scattered trees on it.
You're doing all right.
I'm absolutely
I'm absolutely freezing.
Well, I've got the granny coats.
So if you can't get out into nature, how can you bring nature to you?
So in many ways, through sight, I mean, all the experiments show that, you're going to have a vase of roses on your desk, especially white and yellow roses. These are the colours of flowers that the experiments have shown are the ones that bring about the greatest change in brain activity and leading to this calmer state.
If you can't afford roses, would you do tulips?
So any plants that have got these colour petals, but also the leaves, they've shown that it's bright green and white leaves. But smell is really important. A lot of our home environments are full of sort of chemical smells, and I now do diffuse some of these essential oils in the diffuser because you know you're going to be getting the benefits from the smelling these different scents.
So that is important to know, that my pine-scented floor cleaner may not be doing quite the same job as the essential pinene oil.
It's not bad, the pine scented,
Okay.
because they'll be creating the same compounds to get that.
Okay, so often it is the same.
No, so I mean, I think those sorts of scents are wonderful, and this is where the clinical trials are going with limonene, which is from the citrus. They're showing that actually can be anti-inflammatory, particularly in the airways. I think the most important thing is that the evidence shows that it's the stacked benefits that you get from being in nature, having nature near you. So plastic plants or polyester plants, for example, do not. This experiment showed
really?
that there was a lovely study where they had students that looked at being measured in a clinical setting again, but actually when they viewed polyester plants that looked just like the real thing, then they gave them a tray of the real thing. Very, very big difference in their responses, even though they didn't know.
What's interesting, the number of mechanisms you went through about why this is good for us. you didn't mention exercise. Like we're going to have to walk back to the house like we're at.
Yeah.
We're also getting a bit cold, which as long as we don't get pneumonia, that's probably, it's a bit of a thermal challenge.
We're getting a bit of vitamin D. There's a bit of
sunlight.
sunlight. We're getting a bit of dappled
It's
sunlight.
warming up.
now.
All the things, all my proposed mechanisms, actually, they're almost subsidiary. I can get all those things in London in a way.
Yes, I mean, so there has been a really nice study was done with a large number of people took part in it. They were asked to sort of go into the park, and it's up to them over an 8-week period, about 3 or 4 times a week, and they could determine how long they went for, and they could determine whether or not they ran or walked or sat down or whatever, and then they did this salivary amylase test before and after they did their period in the park. And what they showed was the greatest length of time, or the time that you get the maximum benefits in terms of both lowering of your cortisol and changes in your salivary amylase, is 20 minutes. Beyond 20 minutes, you don't get much more benefit. The greatest benefit occurred for those people who sat and walked.
Walking to the park and sitting on a bench and eating a sandwich rather than sitting at your desk, if you can find that 20 minutes.
A million times better. If you do that for 3 to 4 times a week, and there's some really big population level studies now, that will benefit your health.
And should people who don't feel like doing that, if people say, look, what I like to do at lunchtime is put a show on and put my headphones on and sit by my desk and
sit and doom
sit and scroll.
scroll.
Will they still be getting a benefit?
Yes, even if they were grumpy about being in the park, because these things happen automatically. The number of times when we used to have our children, and my husband used to say, right, let's go out, and it's pouring with rain, and you're dragging 3 young children out, and everyone is angry. Literally within 20 minutes of being out, everyone be happy.
That is maybe the most powerful argument, because that's so resonant. I've got 3 young girls at the moment, and there's times everyone's just going up the wall, and it's like medicine.
Yeah.
You know, if you go out for 10 minutes,
And
it's not a big deal.
It just changes. And the other stuff that's really coming through strongly is the relationship between having green in playgrounds, and this is not just for small children, this is actually for teenagers as well. The cognitive performance and the improvement in cognitive performance is very, very strong.
Why is that happening?
So when you're looking at a computer screen or a particular task in front of you, you're using your focused attention. But that focused attention does wane through time, it just does. But when you look onto a green landscape or look out the window on something green, you use a different part of your attention, and it gives your focused attention a break. And when you come back to the task in hand, what they've shown is you're much more focused and much more accurate in the task in hand.
You know, you're focused on something, and then in your break, you go and focus on something else, like social media or the news or a television program, and then you go back to focusing on something else. Often it doesn't feel like a break.
No, because you're still using your focused attention.
Whereas going and daydreaming outdoors for 10 minutes.
Or even just peering out the window. So,
really? So it's legit to just...
Yeah. Sorry, I'm throwing all this study. There's a lovely study which was done on...
This is why we're here. We want the studies,
we want the studies.
You're here for the
we
studies.
can make stuff up. You know.
But there was a lovely study done on sort of 3,000 school children in Barcelona, all about 8.5, 9 years old, and they measured the amount of green they could see from the classroom window and the amount of green on the way to school, and they took into account all the socioeconomic factors and what their parents did, everything else. And they went back 4 times and measured their cognitive performance. And those children that could see green from their classroom window did better and better in those test scores over those 4 periods in time. It all comes back to something to do with the interaction with nature in these environments that we live and work and play in.
I've got to say, you encouraged us to look up. And looking up is quite... I mean, it's probably the thing, because I'm worried about tripping and I'm always walking along and I've got a small child with me usually. I never look up. But looking up is instantly quite magical and
beautiful,
hypnotic.
Isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
You've got the colours, you've got the fractal dimensions, you've got the movement in the leaves, and you hear that sound.
Are you not getting that, Chris? Are you enjoying that?
No, I am. And the thing I notice is I'm not bored. I find this even in my garden, is that I can just sit in the garden and
because I think you're going to be bored. When you're sitting inside watching a show, you're like, well, it'd be boring to go outside. But when you go outside, it's not boring.
Right, I sit in the garden and everything's constantly moving. The weather's changing. There's wind. There's different sounds. So it's good. I'm up for this.
I think for lots of people in the UK, it is just very difficult to access nature.
Yeah.
We have major cities where in the middle of the city, there's not even a park. I mean, I spend a lot of time in Manchester, one of my favourite cities in the world, but there is no central park in Manchester, really. Is that a big concern, and how might we address that?
So that's a huge concern. And there is a social inequality in access to nature, and it's very, very clear in all the data in the UK. The poorer you are, the less likely you are to be able to access nature. And yet we've got these really big population level studies that are coming out showing that the closer you are to nature, the less common mental diseases you have. And there was a lovely study done in Wales over the last 10 years, looked at 2 million people. They geolocated where they were and they had their medical records. And they show for each 360 metres further away you were from green or blue space, the higher your incidence of common mental diseases. And they showed also that people who are on a lower socioeconomic status got much greater benefits from being closer to green and blue spaces than those who are richer, basically. So if there's ever a policy that says we need to create more green space in cities, that is the evidence base you need. And yet right now in this country we're pulling apart because we're going, we need more houses, we need 1.5 million more houses, and nature is in the way. So we will get rid of the nature and we'll put nature outside the cities where nature will do better, which completely divorces nature from people. And that's the wrong way. We should be thinking of nature like an infrastructure, like water, like electricity, like roads, because we need nature near us, much more than nature needs us, actually.
I love that, the idea that nature should run through a city the way that water does.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Kathy, can we ask how your research affects your life?
Originally, I worked in a very, very academic way. I used to look at fossil pollen. I used to look at everything that was basically dead. And the more I researched this topic, the more I've been drawn into this topic as a research field. The thing that still draws me to all of this is being outdoors and just being in nature. I just love being outside. I always feel better being in nature. And that sort of drives me to understand why. Often it's small things. You can do things yourself. You don't have to wait to be prescribed nature. You can basically prescribe it yourself. And you can get the benefits from nature just by interacting with it on a daily basis, I would say. If you live in the middle of a city in the top of a tower block, you still can get those benefits as long as you have some green space near you. And that's always going to be a challenge.
Amazing.
Oh,
Kathy, thank you so much.
I'm sold. That's good.
I feel like we were all slightly dreading being out in the woods. It's quite a cold day, and actually this has been totally magical.
Well, it's wrapped up in blankets. I'm happy as Larry.
Kathy, thank you so much for joining us on WhatsApp
pleasure,
Docs.
Absolute pleasure.